I want to thank you all for being here. I definitely want to thank our panelists here. So I think most of you probably know them, but State Representative John Smithee, State Representative Ford Price, and our very own Mayor Ginger Nelson. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. And then obviously, many of you in here are part of our partners. We've got a small business initiative that we started a year ago. We're moving into our second year now. And so it's through this partnership that we're able to do business development for our membership, in particular those small businesses coming out of COVID. And then also now as we move into legislative stuff. So I do want to real quick recognize those. Our diamond sponsors, Amarillo EDC, Amarillo National Bank, Atmos Energy, CNS Pantex, Happy State Bank, Northwest Texas Healthcare System, United Supermarkets, and Excel Energy. Thank you, Diamond sponsors, for providing what you provide here. Our Ruby sponsors, Amarillo College, Bank of America, Bell, KC Carpet, City of Amarillo, and Reed Beverage. And then our Sapphire, Andrews and Associates, AT&T, Avant Garden, AEW Broadband, Carson Wealth, Edward Jones, First Capital Bank, First Bank Southwest, Gold Star Custodial Company, Insurica, Plains Internet, Underwood Law Firm, and WT Enterprise Center. So, warm round of applause for those partners. So with that, I want to kind of get going here. I know I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I thought we would start by hearing from John and Ford about some of the priorities as far as the state moving into next year's session. It's never too early to start working on legislation, and so I thought that we would hear from them about what their take is on the upcoming session, and then we'll roll into the mayor on some of the city priorities, and then we'll have some questions as we move forward. So, John, Ford, I'm not sure which one. Usually, Ford, you pass it on to John first, but I don't know.
Well, thank you, Jason. Good to be here. Thank you all for being here. You know, this is, for Ford and I, this is our year off, so to speak, because we're not in session this year. We go back in January through next May. And, everybody is asking, what are the big issues going to be? And the way I answer that is just to say, I'm not sure we even know yet, because so much of what we end up doing in legislative session is, it seems like now more than ever, is determined by events that happen really between now and the session. That terrible incident that we had in Uvalde just a few weeks ago has put some new issues in front of the legislature next time that we weren't expecting to be those issues to be at the forefront. But there'll be some other issues that come up between now and then, and so we're watching those, and we'll monitor those on the local level. I think Ford and I are always looking for opportunities to, I hate to say it this way, but to get some money from Austin. We want to make sure, and what we've always said is we're not trying to get something we don't deserve. We're just trying to get our fair share, and that's not always easy because we're so isolated from the panhandle, from the rest of the panhandle is so isolated from the rest of the state. And also, we have such a minority of representation, numbers-wise. We have, it seems to get smaller every 10 years, but there's only 3 of us here in the Panhandle with Ford and I and Ken King. And we're just outnumbered by other areas. But we're looking for those areas. I know we've talked to the mayor some, that this partnership that has developed between Amarillo and Texas Tech is really an exciting partnership. We have so much of the tech facilities here in town. Most recently, the vet school, which has been a wonderful partnership between this area and Texas Tech. It's going to present a lot of opportunities for young people. We're looking for other partnership opportunities with tech, particularly in the medical area, and there will be some. We'll be able to put those into place. West Texas A&M has become a very exciting place. I don't know if you all have been down there recently. The campus has changed dramatically over the last 10 years. And it really, right now, WT has the finest agricultural facilities that you'll find anywhere in the country. And as the chancellor says when he comes up here, a lot of what WT has is even better than what Texas A&M has down in College Station. So that's an exciting opportunity. And you know, we continue to look for other opportunities to grow this area. I think the big areas are in, of course, higher education, as I mentioned, but also transportation is another area where Ford and I were just talking. I went on the transportation committee this last session, mainly just to build some relationships with the transportation people here in Texas to try to be able to advocate for some of these transportation projects that we have throughout our area. We've got a lot of those going on right now, a lot of renovations that we need to do on particularly our roads that are being in the western panhandle that are being worn out by a lot of agricultural traffic that we have, and then in the eastern panhandle, you know, we have some oil and gas traffic, drilling activity, and so it's tough on roads, and we're trying to get our roads put together. And of course, we've got some other projects that are more long-term. One is, you know, this connection, this ports to plane connection, which is moving slowly, but eventually we'll hopefully get there. So that's kind of where we're focused for next session. The good news for next session is it looks like, well, first of all, it's not a redistricting year. That's good for us. And secondly, we're going to have some money next time, we think. Of course, there's a lot of unpredictability, but it looks like coming out of the COVID situation, our state treasury is going to be in better shape than it's been in the last two to 4 years probably anyway. The high energy prices help some as far as the budget's concerned. So I think it's going to be a better session, but in a way those are harder because there's more people fighting over the money that you've got. So anyway, I'll give it to Ford to see his perspective.
Good morning. I always appreciate working with John. John's been in the legislature for, how long, John? 30 years? 30 years, a long time. So, yeah, 1984, since 84. That's always, you know, comforting to know that you have someone working alongside of you that's got that kind of experience. And I appreciate that very much. The one thing we always have to deal with more than anything else is the budget, because it drives just about every other policy decision that we make. It's the only required bill that has to pass in the legislature every session, and it has to be balanced. Last session, we passed an all-funds budget that totaled $251 billion, and that is within all of the required spending limits. It is indicative of the fact that Texas' economy was and is very strong, very robust, even in light of a shaky national economy. I think Texas remains very much the envy of 49 other states economically. I think we see tremendous prosperity here with sales tax revenue collections, which accounts for about 2/3 of our state's general revenue, and we anticipate that to be the case when we get back. Our state's rainy day fund will top, it should be close to $14 billion when we enter the next biennium. It is about $12 billion now, and that is also extremely strong, that many other states do not have the benefit of accessing if they need to. I was hoping that, and I'm still hopeful, that this next session will be more focused on what I would call infrastructure. It would be an infrastructure session. Texas is growing very quickly across every sector of the economy and in population and demographically. We see about 1,000 people a day new to Texas. Half of that, the state's demographers say, are babies born here, so about 500 a day in Texas, and the other 500 are out-of-state, out-of-country migration to Texas. And so we're very, very popular across the country right now. And as we see all that growth, it's primarily been happening in the last 10 years along the I-35 corridor. That's where the concentration of growth has occurred. I would anticipate, and I'm sure with the AEDC and the council's good work, with all the jobs that are being created here and all this economic activity that we're seeing, mid-sized cities like Amarillo will be very attractive in the future. So we're going to see a lot of growth across the state, and that puts pressure on everything from groundwater resources to healthcare resources, education, criminal justice, you name it. That's going to be something that we need to keep in mind. One of the hardest things I think in the legislative process to do is to convince people to invest and spend money today for something that's going to be a problem, 6 years, 8 years, 10 years down the road. Because we all have to deal with the political realities of, elections 12 months down the road, and people want to know, what did you do for me today? Not what did you do for me a decade from now. And so it is difficult, but I think we owe it to the people of Texas to invest in those issues, because I think they're coming. They're already here. And so whether it's transportation or anything else, that has got to be a high priority, and I hope that it is. John's correct. We're a very reactive body, so in many cases, when you have a winter storm like we had last February, or a year ago February, that takes a lot of attention, for things like weatherization of our power grid and what's going to happen across the state to prepare for, the next weather crisis. And, that happened, and that took about a week away from our session where we couldn't even meet last session. And then when we could get back to meeting in person in the Capitol building, that was a high priority for the House, the Senate, the governor. More than 90% of the state is on the ERCOT grid, and we're not. And so that was one statewide crisis that our phones weren't ringing off the hook, because everybody here, is in the regulated SPS Southwestern Power Pool market. And so we were not in the same boat as most of the rest of the state. And so I do think that, the recent events will certainly necessitate a lot of attention in the next session. I think with COVID, we're still dealing with the effects of the pandemic, to be honest, and whether that's telehealth and telemedicine related, whether that's commerce and regulation, I think we'll still deal with a lot of that too. But the good news is we had, record-setting years in terms of business growth. For a chamber's perspective, I think that's excellent news across the state. We're going to see continued growth in the energy sector. We're going to see continued growth in commerce across the state. We're going to see revenue collections. John's correct. We should enter the next biennium with a surplus, which is going to allow us some opportunity to invest, just like we did when we invested with the Texas Tech School of Veterinary Medicine in programs that if we didn't have a surplus, we would not be able to take advantage of. So I'm excited about that prospect too. So I'll turn it over to the mayor.
First, I want to say to Jason how much we appreciate this opportunity and the focus on it, because I agree with both Ford and John that a lot of what legislatively we can get done is reactive. The agenda is reactive instead of proactive, but this is a very proactive stance. When the lieutenant governor was here a few months ago campaigning, and I had the chance just to sit down and meet with him, he said, "I don't get invited to come to Amarillo." And I was convicted by that. I thought, you're right, Governor, I have never invited you to come to Amarillo. So I think just Amarillo getting in a stance where we want to lean in and we want to bring people here. I can't tell you as the mayor how many times someone says, I've driven through Amarillo a lot, but I went there and I stayed this long, and it's a lot different than I thought it was from the highway. So I think our strength is bringing people to our city for them to see our issues. And case in point, when Mayor Harpole was working on getting funding for Loop 335, John and Ford were able to help him and Kel actually bring TxDOT commissioners and employees, high-level employees from Austin, to drive our loop and actually see the traffic we had on I-40. And sure enough, we got some discretionary funding out of that visit. So I think it is really important to be proactive. And I want to pause for a minute too and say what a unique leadership team we have in Ford and John. Their experience, the number of terms that they've served, their reputation at the Capitol is something you can be very proud of. I'm very proud of it. especially in our current political environment, where rhetoric seems to be what everyone stands behind and gets attention from, and these guys don't do their job on rhetoric. They do their job on character and caring about the people that they represent in their districts. And the working relationship that we have, I'm very grateful for as I compare notes with mayors all across the country, and I realize that you would think we're all on the same team, which means we would all pull in the same direction. It's surprising how much political competition and political insecurity there is between mayors and people who represent them at higher levels in government, because I guess they feel like mayors are going to target them and run against them in the next election. I'm not sure what all of that is about, but I hear a lot of stories about those teams that are not able to work together. And that is not the situation that I have here working with For and John. So I want to say to you both, thank you for your years of service. It is not an easy job, and you guys continue to sign up for it. And so I want to speak on behalf of everybody in the room and say, thanks, we appreciate it. And I personally appreciate the access I have to you and the willingness that you are always showing to work on issues, whether that's the tech vet school, which was a mammoth issue, or small things. And I always have a long list of small things to work on. They're laughing, but it's true. Getting to that small list of things, a long list of small things to work on, small. I'll just throw out that the city council has not yet approved its legislative agenda, but I've seen it already. We're working toward a July agenda item for that. But Andrew Freeman, Assistant City Manager, Andrew, raise your hand so everybody knows who you are. I want y'all to know who Andrew is, because he does a tremendous job for the city. Just this week, somebody in the church community that I respect a lot said, do y'all have, he named a couple of people on staff that are superstars. He goes, do y'all have superstars on the city staff, or are these two kind of your top people? And I said, no, I think I've got 15 more just like them. And then my husband actually challenged me and said, well, name them, I want to hear. And so I did, I got to 15 like that. We have an amazing staff at the city right now, and they are getting stuff done. And so Andrew has worked hard on putting a legislative agenda together. I think it's 5 pages long. It's the best one I've seen since I've been in the mayor's chair. Some of the things that are on there, just practically, I want to throw out to you guys as citizens. One is panhandling, and this is an issue that I've talked to For and John about. It really is an issue of transportation safety for us in the city. I see people out in traffic lanes, and it partners with some initiatives that we have in the city to help homeless issues. So if you don't know, the city is partnering with Guy and Saunders Resource Center to build a new day room. And then the city is using some of its federal COVID funding to build an overnight shelter, like a 60 to 90 day temporary shelter. And then we already have a coming home program that puts those people in permanent housing using federal dollars. And the city has a work program that they can work for our Parks and Rec department, cleaning parks and doing maintenance in parks. So we're working, I think in the next 18 months, we will have this full scale of homeless services, in addition to, we're hoping for funding in the next legislative session for a state hospital here in Amarillo. And that is another mammoth request, but a very needed one. And I know that Ford has done a lot of work on mental health resources, and we appreciate that, and John is certainly supportive of those issues as well. But seeing all of that come together with the state hospital, and then being able to address some issues like panhandling. How can we change our traffic laws so that people aren't stepping into traffic, which creates danger for citizens, drivers? So that's one issue. Another issue is always transportation funding. You guys have already touched on that. Loop 335 is progressing. When I first became the mayor, that was $1 billion project. to finish the segments of the loop, really starting north at like Cherry and coming west all the way down to Hollywood Randall High School out there. And we're making progress there, but we need more funding. And so right back to what Forrest said about infrastructure funding, that's going to be very important for us. Other issues, I may have to check my list. I get off on so many rabbit trails. You know, one thing I want to, it's not on our legislative agenda, but it's been in the news because I signed a letter last week. Gun safety, I think that'll be something that's on the legislature's work list. What I mainly want to see, and what every mayor across the state wants to see, is conversation about it. The status quo is not acceptable. I'm a gun owner, and I know we live in the heart of Second Amendment. We believe that the Second Amendment is what protects our freedom as a representative republic or as a democracy. I do believe that. So what do we need to change in order to protect the Second Amendment right to lawfully own a gun, and to protect people, second graders, you know, teachers, people who are in vulnerable places. I think those conversations need to happen, and I'm sure that'll be on y'all's agenda. It's not on the city's legislative agenda. Andrew, what else? Put you on the spot. Oh, I do want to tell you that there's a group of citizens pushing hard for us to name a major thoroughfare in the city after Dr. Martin Luther King. Really, we are the only major Texas city, I think, that we haven't accomplished that. And so I think there will be some conversation, there is some conversation about trying to designate the portion of I-40 that's inside the city limits as an honorary Dr. Martin Luther King highway. That highway is already designated as the Purple Heart Trail. And so we actually have to go to the legislature to get a second designation for just the part that's inside the city limits. So that's something that'll be on our legislative agenda. Another thing, y'all might have heard that the city council recently took a vote on improving and expanding the Civic Center facility. And I know there are a lot of opinions about that, and I welcome hearing your opinion directly if you want to call me or send me an email about that. And Councilmember Howard Smith is also in the room with us, so if you want to bend his ear about that, he is very knowledgeable about that project. But we would like to pay for it as efficiently as possible without that cost hitting the property tax rate. And one way we can do that is to ask for more hotel occupancy tax rate. Amarillo still could go up 2% on its hotel occupancy rates, but we have to have legislative approval to go up. So if we could do that, then the people who are coming through Amarillo and staying, hopefully for events at the Civic Center, as we expand and renovate that facility, they could carry part of the burden for paying for that project. So that's another thing that we'll be hopefully working on and asking you guys for. So there's a lot of things at the city. One final thing that I'll mention. You see people talking about not using taxpayer dollars to hire lobbyists, because lobbyists are kind of like lawyers. Everybody hates them, right? Or everybody has an idea that the work they do is, I don't know what the right adjective is there, but yeah, shady. Thank you for it. Here's the deal about the city and lobbyists. We are so far away from Austin. We are closer to 3, almost 4 other state capitals than we are our own state capital. In the 5 years that I've been the mayor, more than once, I have left the city at 8 or 9 o'clock at night with a driver to share the time behind the steering wheel to drive to Austin in order to be there for like a 9 o'clock meeting because I had something the night before that was vital for the mayor to be there. I can't catch a flight. These guys know it. I can't catch a flight that can get me to Austin. Now I maybe could because we have the new direct flight for the 9 o'clock meeting. And then I'm there all day for meetings and I can't catch a flight home. So then I'm either driving home late that night or I'm staying another night. So what I'm saying is it's at least one overnight for me to make a trip to Austin to advocate, whether I'm down there at the invitation of the governor, the lieutenant governor, the speaker, or I'm actually down there lobbying other members for an issue that our city wants to see happen. It is a gigantic time commitment. And every hour I'm down there, I'm not here doing the things that need to be done for the mayor's office. So it is a huge disadvantage to the city of Amarillo to be that far away from the Capitol. And our voices need to be present in the Capitol. The mayor of Austin, Steve Adler, he's just blocks. If he wants to go down and visit with someone at the Capitol about an issue, he just walks 15 minutes and he's there and he has the conversation. And then he's back that afternoon to run a city council meeting or whatever the business Austin needs him to do that day. Steve and I like Steve and I respect Steve, Steve and I are about as polar opposite on how to address city issues as anybody can be. And so if Steve's voice is at the Capitol all the time, and it is, I want my voice to be at the Capitol all the time. Because my voice is your voice. And I can't do that because of the physical distance that we are from Austin. But I can do that through our lobby team. And so the city of Amarillo has a contract that we pay monthly. And our lobby team I visit with often, staff visits with often, and they have been very effective for us. Case in point, the Texas Tech Vet School, they were a huge component in helping us have the conversations we needed to have, even though I can't physically be in Austin at the Capitol every day. So I want you to understand there's a lot of rhetoric behind that issue. You know, don't spend taxpayer dollars on lobbyists. Okay, well, that's a good headline. But when you say that, do you know what it's costing us to not have that consultant, that extra voice down in Austin? And when we're not there, when our voices are not in the Capitol, they're always there with Fora John and Kel. But when our voices aren't there, the voices on the other side of the aisle are filling in the void. So I just want y'all to be thoughtful and help us defend our right to be able to hire those consultants to be voices for us in the Capitol. I could go on and on, but I'll let y'all ask questions.
Well, so just to put a little bit of a chamber perspective also, you know, one thing that in the past it seems like it's been a competitive city versus city, especially in West Texas. And I think the one thing that I realize, I think most people in this room realize, I know the panelists up here realize, is that in order for things to happen, you know, we are isolated and there is growth on 35. So we're moving more into a West Texas front. It's not just, hey, Amarillo wants it all, so we want to take it from Lubbock or Abilene. It's going to be one of those things to where we want to help Lubbock grow, we want to help them with their initiatives, and we want them to help us with ours. The same thing with Abilene and Midland and all of West Texas. And so, you know, we've had a Panhandle Days for many, many years. We'll have one in February. But I do see that as we move into the future, that are West Texas Days. And I see the really way that we're going to grow and to continue to compete is as a unified front, West Texas for West Texas. And I know the mayor and I have talked about getting, you know, San Angelo does a great job, and it's one of their biggest events that they do. But I think that we can host events and we can move them around West Texas, and we can get the lieutenant governor here. We can get other representatives here to Amarillo to see what we have here. Because you're right. I mean, most people, when they hear Amarillo, I mean, everybody knows Amarillo, but they don't really know Amarillo. They know the name, but everybody in this room knows if you come to Amarillo and you're here any amount of time, then you're either going to stay here or you're going to come back. And so the more that we can show off our city, then the more it helps all of us in our industries. And so I think it's important that we know moving forward that it is going to be a situation where we are helping other West Texas cities. We're going to get help from them. And as we move forward, that's really how we're going to make a difference. It's not going to be us by ourselves. It's going to be us partnering with those other cities and those other chambers as we move forward. So at this point, I figured that we would get some questions now that everybody, it looks like everybody's awake. I like it. Usually they fall asleep when I start talking. So anyway, I'll walk this mic around, but we'll get some questions. You can ask me, you can ask the mayor, you can ask John or Four. So we'll open it up to questions. Just raise your hand, I'll bring the mic to you. All right, Tom.
Thank you for being here this morning to be a part of this. My name's Tom Foran. I'm on the staff at First Baptist Church. One of my roles is to oversee our jail and prison ministry. As you know, we have 2 prisons on the east side of town. The smaller one, the Neal unit, is empty. COVID took care of that. The larger one, the Clements unit, is considered one of the most violent units in the state of Texas. It's maxed out at about 4,000 men right now. In a recent night, the maximum security building at one of the most violent prisons in Texas had less than 10 officers in it, and that's just unsustainable. A lot of our ministry efforts have been shut down because at that unit, and it's on the average across the state of Texas, the officer staffing is at a 20% level. Starting salary is about $37,000, $38,000 a year for an officer, and it's not a stretch of the imagination to think about if the cartels in those prisons decided to do a truce for 24 hours and say, let's go, we could have a very serious situation on our hands statewide. I appreciate the comments about looking forward in the area of criminal justice. Ford, I think you said that. But I would certainly hope that some consideration is given to using a molecule of that $14 billion rainy day fund to increase salaries for starting officers in Texas Department of Criminal Justice. You mentioned it's a rainy day fund. Right now, TDCJ is facing a violent storm. We're past the rainy day. It's a storm statewide, and it has incredible potential for danger. As you saw what happened with one man getting out of a transport van and slaughtering a family 3 weeks ago. That shut down the entire system for TDCJ. No transportation, no transfers for medical help because of one man's action. So you magnify that times thousands over the statewide, and we've got a serious issue in criminal justice. And I hope that you'll put some thought into making possible, especially increasing salaries to a livable wage for men we're trusting to oversee this problem.
Tom, thanks. I just want to comment on that just real briefly. The last time we gave, that I remember, the correctional officers receiving a raise was probably 2015. It could have been 13, but it probably was either the 83rd or 84th session. And that's so, you know, I mean, obviously, just like a lot of folks, I mean, with the cost of living increase and raises and the competitive nature just to staff those positions against everything else that's competing for, you know, labor right now is extremely challenging. What I would prefer to see is that happen out of our operational budget. One of the hardest things for us in the legislature is to try to get an expenditure out of the rainy day fund approved in both chambers that is going to represent an ongoing expense in the future. So things like salaries, I've never seen it happen because those dollars have typically been reserved for, you know, natural disaster response, one-time expenditures, things like We passed HB 4 in 2013, which created the SWIFT and SWIRF fund at the Water Development Board so that we could develop through evergreen loans at low rates, water resources for communities across the state that need it. And so what I would prefer to see, and I think the stars are somewhat aligned, since we will have more money to work with in our operational budget than what could be the case if the economy were slow or we didn't have a surplus. I would like to see that operationalized or put into the operations budget so that we can sustain that going forward, not just rely on the whims of future legislatures to go to the rainy day fund. But I think you're touching on something that's very, very important. It doesn't affect us just here at the Clemens Unit. I mean, it's across the entire state.
Cameron?
First of all, Mayor, I want to say thank you for the partnership between John and Saunders and the city. I think the city's going to be really proud of what we develop in that area in the years, weeks, and months to come. But secondly, there's another group out there that concerns me in the Amarillo area, and that's affordable housing. I know the city has taken some initiative to look at those issues. For instance, a person working at Amazon is not going to be living in Southwest Amarillo or Randall County. But there's just not a lot of housing out there now. Could you speak to some of the initiatives the city has taken to address that problem?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, Cameron. I was just visiting with a citizen this morning, and he said, do you think Amarillo is going to grow? I was like, yes. Amarillo is in a season of growth. AEDC team is doing a fantastic job just in the last several projects. We've approved 5,000. Those projects alone are bringing 5,000 new jobs to the city. And so when I said that to the citizen, he said, well, who's going to work those jobs? I was like, bingo. Some of those people are going to move here. Some of them are going to graduate from high school here. Those are the two sources for the workforce for those jobs, and more jobs to come because this team is still working, and this city is so easy to sell right now. With our rail access, our east-west highway access, our fabulous airport, it's huge and it doesn't have a ton of traffic. We are the cherry right now. And they said Texas is growing, booming. Yes, I-35 is crowded. Austin is crowded. And real estate there, if you can find the right fit, is expensive. So Amarillo is your value opportunity if you want to relocate your business to Texas. The question is, how are we going to be on the front side? How are we going to be proactive to make sure we have the housing supply that we need in Texas? In Amarillo. So a year ago, we commissioned a housing study. Andrew's nodding his head because these are conversations that we've been working on. And we just received that housing study 1st of May is it on the website, Andrew? Yeah, so that housing study is on the website if it's something you're interested in looking at. But here's the summary of it. It told us what types of housing we need. It would help developers determine the right price points for those. So we're trying to proactively provide information to anyone out in the community who wants to be developing. We have a committee that's working on reinvestment in parts of the city where we already have infrastructure. So, obviously we have sprawl issues in Amarillo, and we're growing southwest and west. And every time those neighborhoods develop, it's costing all of us in infrastructure because we don't have infrastructure out there. So if we can come back in the city and develop where we already have infrastructure, and we're redeveloping some of the neighborhoods where properties need to be either torn down and scraped, or there are just sections of those neighborhoods that have never been developed, they're still vacant, then that's an overall cost savings to us as taxpayers because we have infrastructure in place there. So the neighborhood committee that's working on this is also creating plans that the city can incentivize developers to come back into those older neighborhoods and redevelop, as well as just some of those are permitting. We'll cut your permitting fees to make that cost more economical on your project, but also trying to figure out how we can abate their property taxes for, say, a 5 or 10-year period to incentivize those houses being built in those areas. So, Andrew, what am I leaving out on that front as far as what the city's trying to proactively do to incentivize?
In the older neighborhoods, liens on the property, as far as waiving liens and like prohibiting somebody taking over that development. The state has good programs for affordable housing, tax credit program. Council's also been very supportive of 4%, 9%.
Yes. So just addressing any liens on property that, like if it's vacant property, but it's got liens on it, and it clouds the title and keeps a developer from acquiring it and redeveloping it. We're working on programs about that, and then also connecting into programs that the state of Texas offers for affordable housing. Making sure that we're doing a good job to educate Amarillo citizens and create more access points for them to get those funds and be a part of those state funds. Anything y'all want to add to that? So there's a lot. I wish there was a silver bullet and we could just pull that trigger, but it's not. It's going to be a layered approach, and we're trying to open the doors as much as we can. Even creating some neighborhood empowerment zones, identifying 4 or 5 neighborhoods in our city that we want to see redevelopment in. Can we attract new housing developments in those neighborhoods by, as a city council, creating those empowerment zones and then attaching incentives and programs and funding to anything that happens inside those zones? There you go. We're doing some stuff, yeah, but we're open to more ideas. So if you've got them, let us hear them.
Any more questions?
2 quick questions. I'm Claudia Stravato, and I'm with the League of Women Voters, and we're always interested in voting measures. And with the recent ruling by the Supreme Court that guns can be carried anywhere, and we already sort of had that in Texas anyway, what is our status regarding guns in voting places? Is there, do we have any prohibition for guns in voting places?
I see Ginger's passing the thing over to me. It is a state issue. Polling places are banned, Claudia, right now.
Right now.
And I don't anticipate that changing, to be honest with you. There's a list of about, and the reason I was looking at what I had, I just happened to have this through a discussion yesterday. There's about 20 identified locations which are prohibited currently under existing law. I do not anticipate that changing in the next session, to be honest with you. I just don't see that.
Because there's been concern nationwide about that. And then my second question was about the foster care issue. The state's been under a lawsuit for years. The problem gets worse instead of better. Or do y'all anticipate any new legislation dealing with foster children?
I'll give you my perspective. I'll hand it over to John. The current situation with foster care has been frustrating on multiple levels. Judge Jack out of Corpus Christi has issued multiple orders concerning foster care in the state of Texas. The hard thing, looking at it from the state's perspective under her orders, is there's no achievable goal where once something is done that the federal orders are withdrawn, or that there's anything, in terms of that oversight, there's no end game. So from a state perspective, I'm not saying they've done everything right, because they've had plenty of issues to deal with. Staffing is a huge issue. The rollout of community-based care has been way slower than I think anticipated. And some of the contractors or vendors, there's been issues there too. But I think what we saw last session in the 3rd special, I believe, was an injection of quite a bit of money to address some of the most pervasive problems in caseworker burnout and some of the problems that existed through the management within the Department of Family and Protective Services. I anticipate every session that I've been there has been, almost every session, probably with the exception of the first one, some focus, reform, or adjustments both in the budget and programmatically in foster care. It is a growing need and demand on the folks within the agency, both at the state level and the local level. The biggest problem, or probably not the biggest problem, but one thing that I find very frustrating in that system is you can have the same set of circumstances in Amarillo, Texas, or in Beaumont, Texas, and they be handled very differently. And I think that consistency is an issue, because if families aren't treated fairly and consistently, it puts a negative cloud over the agency, and then it causes a whole other string of problems. I do think that we are seeing emphasis on keeping kids closer to their relatives is a priority that I believe is making headway, so that, for instance, kids from the Panhandle aren't being relocated to the Metroplex or to Houston and vice versa. I think it's always better if you can be by family members, and that's been a priority of the department. And so I anticipate that we will see a lot more of that activity in this next session. Chairman Frank in the House, anyway, has indicated as much. They're spending a lot of time this interim focusing on foster care. So I suspect that we'll see a lot more of that activity and focus in the 88th session.
Well, the foster system has been a real blight on the state. And there's really, if you think about it, no reason that we can't come up with a prototype system here in Texas that is the best in the country. We should do that. We owe it to the children who are in the system. I talk, and I know Ford does too, I talk to a lot of foster parents, and very few of them are satisfied or happy with the way the system is working right now. It's very difficult. Maybe some of you may be foster parents, but we really need to, I think instead of fixing the system we have, we need to tear it down and build one that works. And, Ford mentioned Judge Jack, and, I think the state has treated her kind of like she's the enemy, because she's issued these orders on our foster system. But if you read the orders and the opinions, and they're very intricate and well written, they actually have some very good suggestions for things that we could do to fix our system. And so I think, we know we have a problem, and we really owe it to these kids to get it. These are the most vulnerable kids by and large that we have in Texas, and we need to deal with that in a very proactive way.
I just want to thank you, Claudia, for the League of Women Voters work that they do with the voter guide. I mean, we don't have many opportunities as candidates to express that appreciation of what y'all do, in terms of the publication that gets printed and what is made available to voters before the elections on issues, candidates. That's helpful. So thanks for that work. We appreciate it.
Go ahead.
To piggyback on what you're saying there, John, I certainly agree that we need to tear down the system and rebuild it in one that works. And I think the basic mistake we're making is we're depending on the government to satisfy us when the family unit is the true answer. So, I'm not coming with any complaint except an overview that the government is not the ultimate solution.
I have a question for John and for, I'd like to hear your perspective. In light of the problems that we're seeing on our southern border, the crisis that we have there, in y'all's opinion, what other options does the state of Texas have to deal with that, since we really don't seem to be getting good support from federal?
Yeah, it's a real problem. We commit a lot of resources to the border, and we're diverting those assets and those resources from areas that we need them in the other parts of the state to try to bring some control of the border. You don't have a DPS trooper in the Panhandle, I don't think, who hasn't served time on the border there They're rotated there fairly regularly. We've got a very active DPS presence there, as well as we've had some National Guard presence. And, you know, we've even tried building little stretches of wall or a fence along the border. We finally got access to some of the federal building materials that had just been abandoned after the last election. We were able to get access to those, but you know, from a state resource standpoint, we can't build a fence the entire border. We've got a real problem right now because we have zero control over the border, the U.S. does. And so the border is controlled, but it's controlled by the cartels on the Mexican side. Nothing comes across the border without their permission, which usually involves paying a duty or a tax to the cartels. It's a very efficient business model for them. They generate a lot of money, and they plow that money. It's a combination of border traffic, of drugs, and of other criminal activity. And so you've got this additional problem of, you know, we're putting all these people on the border, but we're also, you know, drugs are coming through Amarillo every day. We're on two of the big thoroughfares with drugs. And I mean, I'm not talking about just some guy with a few drugs. We're talking about a lot of drugs being smuggled around. And it's a real problem. The federal government has got to get control of the border, and that's becoming more obvious now, I think, than it ever has. I don't know how much more we can do, though. You know, we're limited what our DPS troopers can do once they interdict someone at the border, because we put some of them in prison, but we don't have the prison facilities to arrest everybody that tries to come across the border. But we're getting a lot of bad people coming across. It's not just this family coming across that's looking for work. It's people that are coming here to do bad things to us and our children.
Greg, we appropriated $3 billion for the biennium for border security, which is unprecedented. That's all general revenue from the state. That has nothing to do with federal money. And we're the only state in the country that, one, is capable of doing it or will do it. No one else is coming close. And so it's a real frustrating set of circumstances because it's a humanitarian crisis at the border. It's a crisis of epic proportions when it comes to sex and human trafficking and drug trafficking and, you know, just security, just nationally. So the frustrating thing from the state side is that while we were doing all that, if you actually visit the border, the checkpoints, the multiple checkpoints, the surveillance, the equipment, the personnel, the barrier construction, all of that is pretty phenomenal. I mean, it's sophisticated and there's a lot going on, but it is basically for the security of Texans. That's all the state can do. It doesn't control anything with regard to immigration law or border, entry and exit. It's all federal. And so without the cooperation of a state and federal, partnership, a collaborative effort, I think we're going to be constantly battling this. And so it is a little bit frustrating. And, it's going to take reform nationally, I think, to help that situation. And we'll probably, it's been interesting to watch because the Department of Public Safety, who's really responsible, receives most of our funding to implement the policies. They've identified, along the border, where the most crossings are occurring and, where the spots of most activity have occurred, and they've allocated resources there. And then, you'll see apprehensions go way down and you'll see a lot of progress. And then it's just like a sponge or it just oozes different places. And so places that have historically been much more difficult in terms of terrain and activity to monitor or even cross have become much more active. And so, for instance, Starr County used to be quite a hotbed of activity in terms of illegal crossings, and they really did a good job of monitoring that and working the border. It's just, John's right. I mean, I'm not sure what else we can do at this point without any federal help, because we can only control once people do cross. That's all we can do. And DPS is frequently very frustrated because even when they apprehend folks who are crossing the border illegally, they can only contact federal agents, immigration, naturalization agents, border patrol, and sometimes they just don't let them go. you know, they just can't deal with it. And so it is going to get to be more of a problem all the time if it doesn't get corrected at the federal level. But I think the state is doing just about everything it can do.
Hi, my name is Kyle Jacobson. I work for the Chamber of Commerce in Lubbock. And first wanted to echo what Jason said earlier about communities west of 35 working together. I'm too young to remember the alleged rivalry between Lubbock and Amarillo. So I want to work with y'all and Midland, Odessa, and everyone on our shared priorities. But I had a question regarding what y'all anticipate happening in the next session, and what you would support or oppose in the way of school vouchers and school choice.
So that's a great question, Kyle, because since we've been in the since I've been there, and probably before I got there, John, the question of school vouchers has come up a lot, and we've taken votes on it just about every single session in the form of a budget amendment. For those of you that aren't familiar with that concept, it is the concept. It'll get branded several different ways. However, at its core, it is to provide some sort of money that would follow a student so that students could choose, parents could choose where to send their kids to school, and whether it's public or private, and the money that would typically follow that student into a public school could be used to fund that education in a private environment. And so it's way more complicated than that, because at first blush in the past, a lot of folks would say, well, that sounds reasonable, you know, that sounds great. And in concept, it does. The devil is always in the details. And so what has happened is you get a lot of private schools that say, we don't want state money because we don't want, you know, we're private for a reason. We don't want the state telling us what we have to teach and how we have to teach it. We don't want to test the way public schools are tested. We don't want all the strings that are attached to public money. On the other hand, they also want to be private for a reason, because they may not want to take behaviorally challenged children or special ed children, and they have to if they're going to take public money. So there's been this real tension, and then you layer on top of that the fact that in rural communities, a lot of public schools are the center of activity for those communities, meaning if students weren't participating in the public school system, the funding wouldn't be there, and then those jobs would dry up, and then those communities would dry up. And so, you know, there's a lot of challenges that go along with vouchers. I have never supported a voucher system. I don't anticipate supporting one in the future. I've never seen one that accommodates all those issues and more, that adequately lays out, you know, what that would, how that would work, you know, and would be satisfactory. And then I'm cynical enough to believe that if you were going to put some public money, let's just put a number on it and say $8,000 are going to follow every student. If you run a private school and your tuition right now is $20,000 a year, I bet next year it would be $28,000 a year. And I bet it would be more expensive. And then I bet you might find some pop-up fly-by-night institutions that just want to receive the money, but they're not as interested in educating the children. There's lots of great private schools out there, lots of great private schools, but not a ton of them are in the Texas Panhandle. You know, a lot of them are in more urban, concentrated environments. And so I think I have great compassion for kids that are trapped in a public environment where they've got no option. Fortunately, at least in AISD, we've had tremendous cooperation with the district for kids to transfer within the district. We've had, you know, parental choice to educate your kids through homeschooling or to send them to a private school. And that's been great. I think parents should have the right to educate their children however they want to. I think some of the problem is if you're going to also choose to homeschool your children and take the money, how's that audited? How is that controlled? No one ever answers these questions in terms of what that looks like. So if a parent wants to buy a big screen television with the children's money and call it educational, it's going to be hard to know if that's appropriate or inappropriate, if it's true or not true. There's just a lot of details that I think have made that issue troubling, but it is a high priority for a lot of people, and I get it. And maybe the right way to deal with that is let that be piloted in an area where it's actually a problem. You know, if it's inner city Dallas or San Antonio, see what can happen there. But that gets marketed as taxpayer savings grants. It gets marketed as, you know, parental choice. It gets marketed a number of different ways.
I think like most things, you really have to be careful about the details within each proposal to see how it would work. So I anticipate that it's coming, that we'll debate it again. Typically in the past, it's had a lot more support in the Senate than it's had in the House. So we'll see what happens this next session.
Well, let me say a word about Lubbock because it's slightly less controversial than vouchers, since you're from Lubbock. You know, I remember a couple of years ago, well, session before last, you know, when we were in the middle of the vet school fight, and I was booked on a flight to Austin that got canceled here in Amarillo because of some mechanical issues, and I started looking at schedules, and I realized I could drive to Dallas and I drive to Lubbock and take the nonstop to Austin, which we have now, thankfully. But, so I drove to Lubbock, I got on the plane, and coincidentally, it was like Lubbock Day in Austin at the Capitol. And everyone on that plane almost was going to Lubbock Day, and they had a red button on that was promoting the Amarillo Vet School. And I thought, well, that's really wonderful. You know, here on this, I was the only one on the plane from Amarillo, I think, and I was the only one that didn't have, they gave me a button, so. But that's just illustrative of, you know, the Lubbock delegation, you know, they were instrumental in getting that vet school here. They were tireless in trying to get it done. And so we appreciate that cooperation, and that's something that's going on right now. I think we try to cooperate with not only Lubbock, but Midland, Odessa. We have a good relationship. Anything that helps them, we're for, and I think that's reciprocal too. So it's been I think a good change over the last few years. We're seeing more of this West Texas cooperation. I know Ginger's seen it with the mayors, and it's benefiting all of us, I think.
I did want to bring Sean Doherty down. He's the president and CEO of Sharpened Iron Studios, who graciously allowed us to come be in this room today to say a few words. So I'll turn the mic over to Sean.
I always warn people when you give an Irishman an audience and a microphone, saying a few words might be tough to accomplish. First thing, I want to thank Representatives Smithee and Price for y'all's support last biennium as we were trying to improve the film incentives here in Texas. Mayor Nelson, your continued leadership and what you've done to improve the city, and working with the AEDC, who frankly, I think is not going to be very straightforward. Y'all are killing it. I mean, absolutely killing it. And it demonstrates a forward thinking that I think our leadership here in Amarillo has. And I've said this multiple times, Amarillo is a city that's small enough that when you go to your grocery store, you're going to spend 20, 30, 40 minutes talking to people. Because they come up and they know you, they say hi, or someone, your neighbor comes and knocks on your door. But we're also big enough to dream big. We're big enough to dream about a strategic rare earth mineral facility that not only is going to bring billions of dollars in economic impact to Amarillo and thousands of jobs, but frankly is going to put our nation on a better strategic footing, bringing in minerals that we need to separate ourselves from China, to make ourselves more strategically viable. And it's going to be here in little old Amarillo. And we're big enough to think about an Amazon distribution center. We're big enough to think about these things, and we're big enough to think about putting the first purpose-built soundstage, or large soundstage, in the state of Texas. Now, a lot of people, when I say that, they're like, well, you know, there are sound stages in Texas. Yes, there are. But most of those have been warehouse conversions. And if you've ever had to film or been involved in the industry, a warehouse conversion is not a soundstage. It does not give you the true sound actuation that you need to truly be able to produce high-quality, Hollywood-level feature films. We have a small studio on the Rio Grande. Their largest soundstage, they have two. Their largest soundstage is 5,000 square feet. By comparison, our baby stage is the 3,000 square foot soundstage that's behind this building, or behind this room. By the way, probably next time y'all come to this room, it's going to look very different. These tables and chairs we're going to be removing. We're going to put 5 tiers of decks. There will be chairs, so we can still have events here. But the design is for this to become the scoring room for all of Sharpened Iron Studios and our outside clients to come in and score their feature films or the TV shows. Our next feature film, Joplin, which is about the 2007 F5 hurricane that nearly took Joplin, Missouri off the face of the earth, is going to be scored in this room using our very own Amarillo Symphony. I'm excited about that. I'm excited about having that big Amarillo Symphony logo in the credits of Joplin as it rolls by, and letting people know what a phenomenal symphony we have here in Amarillo. But I just want to give you a quick update on SIS. Up here is a rendering concept. These will be two of the largest purpose-built sound stages in the state of Texas. I don't know if I know how to use the, yeah, hey, look at that. This is, I call a pill for obvious reasons. There's a 15,000 square foot stage in the middle. On the end here is a 7,000 square foot virtual stage. If you're familiar with the Mandalorian, you'll know what an LED volume is. That's one we're going to be putting there. It's state-of-the-art visual special effects. About 14,000 square feet of production offices there. This one here we call the barn, for obvious reasons, and it is 15,000 square feet. Now, Texas has a lot to offer the movie industry. We have the worst film incentives in the nation, and again, Representative Price and Smithee are working with us to improve that. But we've got so much more we can offer. We have the best business climate in the nation. We have, particularly when you get up here into the Panhandle, the friendliest people in the nation. When we shot What Remains, our first feature film, one of my producers had budgeted $36,000 for location fees. I'm like, Corey, you're not going to need it. Well, no, people are going to want to get paid. I'm like, no, you're not going to understand. Well, the two houses that we used to film that movie, not only did they refuse to accept payment, but the wives made casseroles for all the cast. Judge Dyer, because we used the Randall County Courthouse, sent back the $500 check after we had finished. We're just friendly here. But we also have a lot of land, and we have a lot of different locations that can give you a variety of looks. And Amarillo once again stepped forward and was the forefront of an industry that is coming here to Texas by not only approving but embracing SIS. And that has led to a couple of interesting things. Recently, about 6 months ago, Bastrop, Texas, approved a fairly significant size film studio. 546 acres, 486,000 square feet of sound stages, 300,000 square feet of warehouse mill shop, 200,000 square feet all total of office spaces. Their first phase is $40 million, 6 stages, 108K square feet of stages, 46,000 office space, 108,000 warehouse and mill space. You'll notice a significant difference. They are still using the traditional concrete tilt-up. We're using the sprung soundstage, which is state-of-the-art revolutionary design. I'll talk about our phase 2 project in just a second. Last month, San Marcos approved another fairly significant size soundstage. 75,000 acres, 120,000 square feet of stage, warehouse, mill shop, office space. Cost on that is $256 million. They hope that they'll be open by 2025. Now, the reason it costs so much is because they're using your typical concrete tilt-up. After we finish what we're calling phase 2, which are the 2 big sound stages we're going to build in this parking lot across from Polk Street, we intend to go to what we call phase 2. I'm sorry, this is phase 1, this is phase 2. Phase 2 is going to be a 77-acre project that will sit on between 150 and 200 acres of land. The actual stage complex right here is on 77 acres, and the remaining acreage will be used to create backlots, a Wild West scene, suburban street front, urban street front, et cetera, et cetera. We will have upwards of 16 sound stages. The San Marcos facility is 8 to 10. We will have 16. We have a corporate office, but also a data and animation facility right here. But to be honest, as cool as all this is what I'm most excited about. Has anyone been to Universal Studios and taken the tour? Okay, so in the tour, you go through, and they go through neighborhoods. Oh, that's where Doris Day was filmed. That's where Leave It to Beaver was filmed. There's the Munsters house, right? That's what these are. These are homes that are put inside or put into different blocks. Each block is going to be a different style. This block may be Santa Fe, New Mexico. This may be New England. This may be Transylvania. But the purpose of that is to provide different shooting locations for outside vendors to come and shoot. But we decided to take it one step further. In this really leads to the question about affordable housing. On the universal tour, these are all facades. They're 4 walls, a concrete foundation, and a roof. At phase 2, these are gonna actually be single-family residences that people will be able to come and rent. Now, part of the lease will be clear that your home is going at one time or another be in a TV show, commercial, or film, and you're going to be disturbed by a camera crew. But you'd be surprised at how many people have already said they would love to live in something like that. Now, if you go back to the San Marcos facility, 8 to 10 stages, $256 million, because we are using this new state-of-the-art design, Sprung, we anticipate that our phase 2, which is almost twice the number of sound stages, will be between $80 and $100 million to build. And it will be built within half the time that it's going to take them to build San Marcos. So Amarillo, once again, is on the forefront. Now, Texas stands at the verge of a tremendous opportunity. We have an opportunity to grab market share in the entertainment industry. Clearly, others have seen what we have seen here, that this is a great place to build studios, a great place to film. If we can, with the help of our incredible representatives, improve the film incentives in Texas, so where we go from not the worst in the nation, but one of the best, with everything that Texas has to offer, with SIS 1 and 2 and the other stage studios that are being built, we will capture a tremendous share of the entertainment industry market. And I believe Amarillo in particular, as they say Atlanta is the Hollywood of the South, I believe Amarillo has the opportunity to be the Hollywood of the Plains. But I think we would do it better. But it would not be possible without the 3 people sitting up here, without the chamber, without the AEDC, who was one of the first groups to support SIS when we were doing phase 1. If you haven't taken a tour every Friday at 3:30, my COO gives the best tour in town. Love to take you through SIS and give you a tour, show you what we have, and talk to you about what we're going to do. I welcome you here at Sharpened Iron Studios. It's a pleasure for us to be part of the chamber. It's a pleasure to participate in all the chamber functions, but to offer our facilities for use. So thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Sean. That's exciting stuff. Always like hearing about all that. Look at us, we're pretty close to being on time here. So I just want to thank John, Ginger again for coming, for all you do. I cannot say enough, and I think everybody in this room really appreciates your hard work. A lot of times it's a thankless job, and so I just want to make sure you know you've got support here, and thank you for all you do. Thank you for our partners that are here, for allowing us to do these things, and thank all of you for coming and spending a few hours with us. So I think we'll stick around if anyone has any other questions, but thanks again.